You will now be taken automatically through the trail.
Hello. You've chosen to take the Masterpieces tour. First of all, make sure you're at the entrance to the Sully Wing, which is where your tour will start. The Louvre is a huge maze of a museum, and you'll be passing through the busiest parts of it, so there's a risk of losing your way. Before you go through the ticket gates and begin your tour, we'd like to ask you to please listen carefully to the directions we'll be giving you throughout your visit. We'll be asking you to turn left or right, and to stop at certain points. Listen. Did you hear the footsteps? It's time to make a start. Walk straight ahead and see if you can keep pace with the footsteps. You're now heading for the ticket gates. Don't forget to show your ticket. Carry on straight ahead now and go round the circular balustrade you can see in front of you. You can go round to the left or the right. It's up to you. Then continue straight on. During this tour, you'll be learning about the history of a number of the museum's key works. Some of these, such as the Venus de Milo, the Victory of Samothrace, and of course the Mona Lisa, are world famous. You're now in a room with huge pillars supporting the vaulted ceiling. This area serves as a kind of introduction to the medieval Louvre that you're about to discover. Continue to the end of the room. Now that you're at the end of the room, walk towards the opening you can see on your left. You've now reached the medieval moat. To your left, there's an impressive model showing an idealized version of the Louvre castle, as it was at the beginning of the 15th century, after the work carried out under King Charles V. Carry on along the wooden walkway that follows the castle moat. Stop once you reach the corner. Art historian Régis Labordette.
The way out of the pyramid is through an underground passage, which took you to the western edge of the medieval castle. This was the original Louvre, built at the end of the 12th century by King Philip Augustus. You're now in what was the north side of the castle's moat. To your left was the outer wall of the moat. To your right, the lower sections of the castle itself, the bases of its towers, and in particular the corner towers. The amazing thing is that in the Middle Ages, the castle was actually outside Paris. Why was this? Because the Louvre was built for defence. The Seine is very close by, and the river could have been a particularly easy route for enemies to get into the city, which is why the king had both the city walls and the castle built at the same time.
You followed the walkway to the corner of the two high walls of the medieval castle. Now keep on going. Further on, to the right, you'll see a rectangular wall standing on its own, and two of the old towers very close to each other.
You've now gone past the northeast corner tower, and the thing that stands out most here is the entrance to the castle. The gateway is enclosed by two towers very close to each other, from which it could have been defended. Just to our right is an amazing pier. On top of this rested the drawbridge. In the 17th century, what remained of the castle was destroyed, and the northern and eastern sides of the moat, where you are now, were filled in. This was done in order to build the cour carrée, which remains here to this day and is actually above us right now. Much later, as part of the Grand Louvre renovation programme between 1983 and 1985, these parts of the moat were cleared out again and were made part of the visitor experience. They were covered with a reinforced concrete ceiling, which blends marvellously with the old walls. They wanted a rustic aspect with a slightly military feel to it, so the military function of the castle is complemented by the aesthetics of this reinforced concrete ceiling.
In front of you is a sphinx, the great Sphinx of Tanis, which conjures up another world, the world of ancient Egypt. It was sculpted from a single block of pink granite and represents a pharaoh with a lion's body. Turn to the right of the Sphinx and climb the stairs in front of you. At the top of the stairs, rather than continuing straight ahead into the gallery you'll see in front of you, turn left. This will take you into another gallery that runs parallel to the first and leads to the Venus de Milo. It also contains statues of Greek gods and heroes. The statues you can see here are Roman copies of famous Greek works from the 5th century BC. It's very rare for the originals to have survived, so copies like this are often our only way of getting to know the famous statues that once adorned the sanctuaries and public spaces of ancient Greece. As you move through the gallery, you'll pass by Ares, the Greek god of war, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and Apollo, the sun god and protector of the arts. In Rome, they were known respectively as Mars, Venus, and Apollo. Now make your way through the gods and the crowds towards the Venus de Milo. You've now reached the first masterpiece on our tour, the Venus de Milo. Unlike the other statues in the gallery, this is an authentic Greek sculpture. Here is National Museum's lecturer, Hélène Baudier, to tell us why this sculpture is known as the Venus de Milo.
Alors pourquoi ce nom? Milo, c'est Mélos.
Because Milo is another name for the Greek island of Milos, the island where the statue was discovered in 1820 by a Greek peasant. A young officer in the French Navy was also there and immediately recognized the importance of the sculpture. It was bought by the French ambassador in Istanbul, the Marquis de Rivière, who presented it to King Louis XVIII. The king decided to place the statue in the Louvre. So Milo refers to the place where the statue was found. But why Venus? As you may know, Venus is the name of the goddess of love and beauty. But Venus is the Roman name for this goddess, whereas her Greek name is Aphrodite. As this is a Greek statue, we prefer to call it the Aphrodite de Milo, or the Aphrodite of Milos. However, we can't actually be certain of the identity of this goddess.
Aphrodite de Milo ou Aphrodite de Mélos. Mais cette identité n'est pas sûre.
Now find yourself a place facing the statue.
Alors vous êtes maintenant devant la statue.
You're now in front of the statue, so you can see that, unfortunately, it's incomplete. The arms have never been found. We think that her right arm was held across her chest, whereas her left arm was raised. There have been many theories, for example, that she was holding attributes like an apple or a mirror. It's also possible that she was part of a group of other statues. In reality, we're not sure, but the absence of arms adds a certain air of mystery to the goddess and also draws our focus to the essence of the work, which is the representation of female beauty. Your first view is from the front, And what strikes you is how monumental the statue is. It is larger than life-size. You're also struck by the stability of the work, whose weight is lightened by the movement of the left knee, which is bent slightly forward. There's a very sensual aspect to the torso rising up from the drapery around her hips. And then there's her face, beautifully serene, yet at the same time slightly cold. You try to meet her gaze, but it refuses to be pinned down.
C'est un regard divin qui ne se laisse pas croiser.
Now move around the statue to the left and take a look at Venus's profile.
Le traitement de la draperie apparaît plus complexe.
We can see more complexity in the work on the drapery here. Look at the folds. They follow different directions, as if to accentuate the sensuality of her flesh. But at the same time, the profile of her face very much conforms to an ideal. The statue's different from this point of view. There's more mobility in its construction, and it really does give the impression of inhabiting a three-dimensional space.
Now move on again so that you can see Venus from behind. Have you noticed? Almost no one looks at the statue from this viewpoint, even though we can learn a lot about the Venus de Milo from this view.
Est-ce que le sculpteur invitait à tourner autour de
Did
la
the sculptor
statue?
plan for people to walk around his statue? Looking at it from behind, we suspect not. As you can see, the marble has been sculpted less carefully. Here, the sculptor hasn't tried to hide the horizontal join between the upper and lower blocks of marble from which the statue was sculpted. Perhaps this is because originally the statue was to have been placed against a wall or in a niche. But looking at this view from behind today, we can appreciate the sinuous line of her spine that gives the torso its elegance, and we can see the few strands of hair that have come loose, making her hairstyle appear softer and more sensual.
The statue must have been sculpted between 130 and 100 BC, which was the last century of Greek art. Unfortunately, we don't know the name of the sculptor. He may have taken his inspiration from another older work, but was able to rework it to create this powerfully original work. Now stand back a bit, away from the statue and crowd, perhaps over by the window. Of course, there are many other reasons why this figure of Venus is so famous, starting with her nudity. The female nude has become one of the major themes in Western art, but we shouldn't forget that it was invented by the famous Greek sculptor Praxiteles in the 4th century BC. Classical statuary was a constant source of inspiration for artists from the Renaissance to the 19th century. But the statue's fame is also the result of the new image reproduction techniques that were developed during the 19th century, such as photography, which made it so familiar. The statue's image spread right around the world, and its marble beauty continues to be admired by visitors to this day. It's time for us to leave the Venus de Milo now. If you stand behind the statue, you'll see 3 archways to the left of Venus. Go through the middle archway. Now that you're through the archway, you should be able to see the entrance to a room straight ahead of you. Go into this room, which is called the Salle des Caryatides. If you want to avoid the crowds, you can remain behind the figure of a young man putting his sandal back on.
En entrant dans cette salle des Caryatides,
When you enter the Salle des Caryatides, you're still at the heart of the Louvre's collection of antiquities. The works here are Roman replicas of Hellenistic sculptures. But you're also entering what was the great reception room of the Louvre in the 16th and 17th centuries. Opposite you, right at the end of the room, is a sort of balcony. This is the musicians' gallery. It's held up by the caryatids, the columns in the shape of women that give the room its name. These sculptures, a borrowing from classical Greek architecture, perfectly illustrate the talent of the 16th century artists who created the room.
In the center of the Salle des Caryatides, you'll see a statue of a woman standing on a pedestal. She has one hand raised and is about to pull an arrow from her quiver. Move closer to the statue. This is Diana, the Roman goddess of hunting. You can easily identify the goddess by her attributes. With her right hand, she's pulling an arrow from her quiver. Her bow, which she would have been holding in her left hand, is now missing. The short garment she's wearing is suitable for hunting, and since Diana was also the goddess of the moon, she wears a crescent moon in her hair like a diadem. The goddess is shown here as a running figure. Her left leg is extended quite far forward, but this doesn't undermine the balance and harmony of the statue. Now take a look at the animal at her feet. This is probably the hind with golden horns, often associated with Diana. Be sure to view the statue from all sides to fully appreciate its beauty. This figure of Diana is a Roman work dating from the 2nd century AD, but like many of the statues made at that time, it was probably inspired by a Greek original dating from the 4th century BC that has now been lost. The statue was discovered in pieces, and the missing parts were recreated by a Renaissance sculptor. Incomplete statues did not conform to 16th century taste, and people had no qualms about sculpting sections missing from ancient works. Take a look at the hind, for example, and you'll clearly be able to see where a piece has been added in the neck area. The figure is known as the Diana of Versailles, simply because Louis XIV decided to place the statue, which was one of the oldest in the royal collections, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Château of Versailles. The Diana of Versailles was admired by numerous French artists between the 16th and 18th centuries. They produced works that were inspired by the statue, some of which you might come across during your visit to the Louvre. Now turn around and leave the Salle des Caryatides. Turn to the right, then walk straight ahead. You're leaving the Sully wing and entering the Denon wing. Walk through the first room you come to. This is the Salle de Diane. If you look upwards, you'll see a semicircular painting dating from the 19th century that shows Hercules obtaining the hind with the golden horns from Diana. After going through the first room, stop once you reach the second circular room. Take a look above you at the paintings and sculpted mouldings on the ceiling. This is the Rotonde de Mars, the Mars Rotunda, where we'll be stopping for a moment.
To your left are the summer apartments of Anne of Austria, Louis XIV's mother. These apartments were decorated in the mid-17th century, but there was already a gallery here in the 16th century.
These very fine surroundings tell us about life in the palace during the 17th century. Anne of Austria liked to retire to these rooms to enjoy some peace and quiet, away from the court. Today, the area is used to display the Louvre's collections of Roman antiquities. Now carry on over to your right. At the end of the gallery, you'll see a flight of stairs. Go up these stairs and turn left. You'll arrive at a wide marble landing. Continue into the middle of this landing and stop there for a moment. First, take a look down to your right at the Galerie Daru.
Il n'est pas étonnant que la Galerie Daru.
It comes as no surprise that the Galerie Daru, with its sarcophagi and its classical sculptures, forms a harmonious combination with the Escalier Daru, which is on your left. They formed the main entrance to the museum in the time of Napoleon III. At the end of the room on the right is Michelangelo's Slave. This view of the museum is one of the finest in the Louvre, taking in the slave on one side, and on the other the victory of Samothrace, which completely dominates the staircase.
Stand here for a moment, but watch out for other visitors. Hélène Baudier.
At the top of this monumental staircase, you can see another of the great masterpieces of the Louvre, the Victory of Samothrace. This Greek monument, which can be dated to around 200 BC, used to stand in a sanctuary to the great gods on the small Greek island of Samothrace in the northern Aegean. The monument was discovered in 1863 by a Frenchman, Charles Champoiseau. You have to imagine it as it would have been then, dominating the sanctuary from its lofty position. This was a colossal offering, since the monument stands over 5 meters, more than 16 feet tall. It was intended to commemorate a naval victory.
It's now time to go up the Escalier d'Arrou. Climb the stairs up to the landing where the statue is. Once you've reached the statue, head towards the window on your left. Look over towards the statue. When it arrived at the Louvre in the 19th century, this monument was just a collection of fragments. What you can see today is the result of a lengthy process of restoration.
This monument, as you can see, is made up of 3 parts. There's a rectangular base topped by the prow of a ship. The sculpture is very accurate. We can tell it's a fast warship dating from the 3rd century BC. Then there's a block of stone that's a modern addition. And on top of this stands a statue of the goddess of victory. The Greeks called her Nike and depicted her as a woman with wings who comes down from the skies to announce victory. Here you can see that she's just landed on the deck of the ship and her wings are still beating. Neither the statue's head nor its arms or feet have been found, but it's been possible to recreate her right hand from fragments of the palm and 2 fingers. You can see this hand in the small display case beside you on this landing. We can imagine that the goddess was holding her right arm forward with her hand open in a salute.
There's a great dynamic power to this figure caught in motion. It's particularly apparent when you see a 3/4 view of the statue from the left. This is what the sculptor intended as the principal viewpoint. You can see it on your screen now.
The very strong forward movement of her right leg is highlighted by the way her cape falls between her thighs, while another part of it flies out to the back. And then, using effects known as wet drapery, the tunic reveals the sensuality of her lower torso, as well as the muscular tension in her left thigh. But the Victory of Samothrace is also a masterpiece of balance and assembly. The statue itself, as you can see, is a challenge to the laws of gravity. The wings are totally detached from the body. And as for the base, it's composed of 3 layers of stone, one on top of the other, with the statue standing at the balancing point of all these forces to ensure the stability of the whole piece. Ask yourself this question. When you arrived at the monument, did you try to identify it? Did it bother you that there are no arms or head? No. The fact that they're missing isn't a problem. In fact, it only adds to the expressive power of this figure in motion. The writer André Malraux put it best when he described the Victory of Samothrace as the image of the perfect angel.
From where you are now, you can see a large door with carved wooden panels. Go through the doorway into the rotunda. First, take a look into the museum's courtyard through the first window on your left.
Depuis cette fenêtre, tournée vers le nord,
From this north-facing window, you can admire the full extent of the eclectic design of the Cour Napoleon's porticos. They date back to the era of Napoleon III. But to the left of this courtyard is the pyramid, the best-known feature of the museum's renovation in the 1980s.
The glass pyramid was designed by the architect Yeo Ming-pei. Since 1989, this remarkable piece of architecture has been the main entrance to the museum. The pyramid is a shape that doesn't belong to any specific civilization or era, so there's a universal and timeless dimension to Pei's pyramid. It could also be said to represent a completion of all the buildings surrounding it, for example, in the way its proportions mirror those of the Cour Napoleon's great pavilions. Take a moment to look at the Rotonde d'Apollon. Inscribed on the panels covering the walls, you'll see the names of donors to the museum and a list of the excavations carried out by the Louvre's archaeologists. These inscriptions reveal some of the ways in which the Louvre adds to its collections. Now go through the very handsome wrought iron gates into the Galerie d'Apollon. Take a look up at the ceiling. The decoration in the Galerie d'Apollon is amongst the finest in the museum. It was created for Louis XIV. Work began in the 1660s under the direction of Charles Lebrun, who had designed the decoration for the Hall of Mirrors at the Chateau of Versailles a few years earlier. Galerie d'Apollon means the Apollo Gallery, and the decorative scheme is entirely dedicated to the Greek sun god Apollo, who was also the protector of the arts. The large ceiling paintings refer to the sun's path through the sky. At the end of the gallery, by the window, you see the morning, while night is at the opposite end, by the entrance. And the orientation of the gallery itself echoes the same iconography, because the windows face east, towards the rising sun. Now look at the four large paintings resting on the cornice, which represent the four seasons. The decoration was left unfinished by Lebrun in the 17th century, but was gradually completed in the 18th and 19th centuries. The large panel in the centre of the ceiling was painted in 1851 by Eugène Delacroix. It shows the sun at its highest point. Apollo, symbolizing the forces of light, is killing the serpent Python, who symbolizes the forces of darkness. That Charles Lebrun should choose the god Apollo to adorn the ceiling of this gallery was clearly no coincidence. The sun is a source of light, but it's also a symbol of domination. Take a look at the four corners of the gallery, where you'll see large male figures who appear to be bound in chains. They represent the four continents, subject to the power of the sun. The sun god Apollo is also the protector of the arts, and the large female figures, also resting on the cornice, are the 9 muses. So all of these associations are very much a celebration of King Louis XIV, who is compared here to a Greek god and the sun. Today, Louis XIV is known as the Sun King, but at the time, this was a new image that the Galerie d'Apollon helped to propagate. Now leave the Galerie d'Apollon and return to the victory of Samothrace. Go past the foot of the statue and continue straight ahead towards the gallery decorated with columns. This gallery is the start of a new chapter in your visit. After admiring the treasures of Greek antiquity, You're now about to discover the Louvre's collection of Italian paintings, which is one of the largest outside Italy. Almost all the great Italian painters are represented by major works. At the end of the gallery, go through the door into the next room, which is the Salon Carré. The Salon Carré, or Square Hall, is one of the most prestigious rooms in the Louvre. This vast 18th century room was the venue for an annual painting exhibition that soon became known as the Salon, in reference to the place where it was held. Today, the room contains Italian paintings dating from the late Middle Ages up until the early Renaissance, including works by Cimabue, Giotto, and Fra Angelico. Now make your way to behind the large partition dividing the Salon Carré. On the right-hand wall, you'll see a large painting of a battle scene. The Battle of San Romano was painted by Paolo Uccello, probably between 1435 and 1440. The subject is an episode from the battle between Florence and Siena that took place in 1432. The painting is the second of a set of 3 panels and shows the Florentine forces staging their victorious counterattack. We're struck by how strange the painting looks. The curtain of greenery in the background has darkened considerably over the years, and the silver leaf used to portray the shining armor has oxidized. In spite of this, the composition is still perfectly clear. The tightly packed mass of men and horses is arranged in a succession of planes to either side of the captain, who, on his rearing horse in the center of the painting, gives the signal to attack. From right to left, the entire composition accelerates with the vertical lines formed by the lances and the legs of the horses and infantrymen. But what seems to fascinate Uccello more than anything else is the depiction of geometrical shapes and volumes. Take a look in particular at the armor, lances, helmets, and hats. The painter has clearly enjoyed experimenting with the techniques of perspective, the rules of which had just been codified in Florence. This new method of painting allowed artists to create a more faithful impression of reality. The surface of the painting became a window through which the viewer looked. Turn around now and leave the battlefield of San Romano. You'll see a doorway to your right. Go through it, and you'll soon find yourself in one of the most important parts of the museum and the Louvre Palace, the Grande Galerie. Make your way towards the seated figure of the god Mars. Then carry on until you reach the first set of columns on either side of the gallery.
La Grande Galerie a eu pour fonction
The Grande Galerie served to connect the old palace of the kings, the Louvre itself, and the new Tuileries Palace, which was built in the 16th century. It was King Henri IV who had this gallery built right at the end of the 16th century and at the very beginning of the 17th century. But it was never really completed. The idea of using this space to display the royal collections dates back to the time of Louis XV, and the project continued in more detail under Louis XVI. This was also when people began to think carefully about the key question for a museum: how to properly light the paintings. It was only in the mid-19th century, under Napoleon III, that the continuous roof light was installed to provide the very even lighting you can see now.
When you've passed the first columns, go over to look at the paintings on the wall to your left. There, you'll see the Louvre's collection of several paintings by Leonardo da Vinci. Continue straight ahead. Now go through the doorway to the right of the painting. You're in the Salle de Cétat, or the Salle de la Joconde. Look over to the large wall in front of you. Take your time as you approach the Mona Lisa. Anyway, the crowd of people in front of her will slow you down. National Museum's lecturer, Sonia Brunel.
Nous voici en présence du tableau le plus connu.
Here we are in front of the Louvre's most famous painting, perhaps the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa, or La Joconde, as she's called in French. It was painted by Leonardo da Vinci in around 1503, and he probably returned to the painting to finish it in around 1516. The subject of the painting is a young Florentine woman called Lisa del Giocondo, hence the painting's name in French, La Joconde. Giocondo was the name of her rich husband. Her identity is well known now, but remained a mystery for some time, and the subject of many theories, including that the Mona Lisa was perhaps a man, or even that it was a portrait of Da Vinci himself. All theories that have now been proved totally false. This is one of the 7 portraits that Leonardo painted, and perhaps the first thing that strikes us when we see the work is its size. It can be a surprise to find such a modestly sized portrait. But back when it was painted, quite the opposite was true. This was a large portrait. It's actually quite an exceptional size compared to what was being painted at the time, and even compared to what Leonardo was painting.
Now go and take a close look at the Mona Lisa. If there are lots of people, be patient. Your turn will come soon.
La Joconde, si on l'observe attentivement,
If we look carefully at the Mona Lisa, we notice that she's bathed in both light and shadow, and that she forms a whole with the landscape we can see in the background. This is a technique called sfumato. But what exactly is sfumato? It's a way of painting without drawing, of blurring the outlines, and in fact, there aren't any outlines here. The volume is expressed through the play of light and shade. When people see the Mona Lisa, they try to find out if it's true that her eyes follow you around. It's true, her eyes do follow us, but that's not the exceptional thing about this portrait, because many other paintings from that time give the same impression. It's the difference between the direction of her gaze and the position of her face that creates the illusion. When we talk about the Mona Lisa, we also talk about the Mona Lisa's smile. It's a fairly subtle, almost secret smile. And you wonder how much Leonardo wanted to capture not just the physical appearance of his model, but also perhaps her personality, which is expressed here by that enigmatic smile.
Now move back from the painting and away from the busy area of the room. Find a place a little way back so that you can freely enjoy the company of the Mona Lisa. The painting had been part of the royal collection since the Renaissance and was displayed in the Chateau of Fontainebleau and then the Chateau of Versailles, before being moved to the Tuileries Palace under Napoleon I. It was first hung in the Grande Galerie in 1802.
Lorsque la Joconde est présentée au
When the
début
Mona
du
Lisa was
19e
presented at the beginning of the 19th century, it was a famous work, of course, but not to the extent that it is today. So what exactly was it that won her such great renown? In 1911, an Italian workman stole the Mona Lisa, and this was when it became a real media phenomenon. There was lots of coverage of the theft in the newspapers and a police inquiry. The whole thing lasted 2 years and ended with the Italian government giving the Mona Lisa back to the Louvre. But there were more ups and downs in store, such as the time in the 1950s when a visitor threw a stone at the painting. As time has gone by, the Mona Lisa has grown from a masterpiece into a legend.
All these incidents obviously contributed to the painting's huge popularity. You can see images of it everywhere. But it has paid a high price for its fame. In 1919, the artist Marcel Duchamp attacked a reproduction of this icon of Western art by provocatively decking out the Mona Lisa in a little beard and moustache. Now make your way behind the tall partition on which the Mona Lisa hangs. You'll notice an opening that will lead you to the Salle Rouge, the Red Rooms, which are devoted to large-format French works dating from between 1780 and 1840. There you'll find works by David, Ingres, Géricault and Delacroix. You find yourself in a large space at the meeting point of two large rooms. Head towards the room on the right. The red walls form a striking contrast to the paintings in their gilt frames. These rooms were built in around 1860, during the Second Empire. In the center of the left-hand wall, you'll see the vast painting showing the coronation of the Emperor Napoleon. The painting measures around 60 square meters, or 650 square feet, making it the largest in the Louvre after Veronese's wedding feast at Cana, which you may have seen in the Salle de la Joconde. The date is the 2nd of December 1804, and we see Napoleon I in the presence of the Pope in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Napoleon's choice of artist to immortalize the scene was the French painter Jacques-Louis David, who took 3 years to complete the work. David was present at the ceremony, where he made numerous sketches, but the painting is far from a faithful record of the event. Instead, it has been carefully composed to glorify the emperor. Napoleon remains the central figure, bathed in light, whilst his wife, Josephine, is kneeling in front of him. And behind him, Pope Pius VII is a seated, pensive figure who only plays a secondary role. The painting contains no fewer than 200 figures, 75 of whom can be identified. To the far left of the composition, for example, we can recognize Napoleon's brothers and sisters. The painter has captured the moment at which Napoleon is about to crown his wife Josephine. David had originally begun by painting Napoleon crowning himself. You can still see traces of this first figure. Behind the emperor's face, you can make out a second face in profile, head bent backwards and crowned in a golden laurel wreath. There is another alteration of note. In the place where Napoleon was initially standing, the artist has added the figure of an Italian priest with the features of Julius Caesar. The presence of a Roman emperor would obviously have been very flattering for Napoleon. David also permitted himself another departure from reality by adding a family member who was absent from the coronation. The woman seated on the platform in the middle of the painting. She's Napoleon's mother, Letizia Bonaparte, who remained in Rome on the day as she was opposed to the ceremony. She disapproved of the coronation of Josephine because the young woman had not borne her son a child. But there was no room for a family quarrel in this work of propaganda. So, in line with the emperor's wishes, David included Letizia Bonaparte as guest of honor, a smile of approval playing on her lips. You've now reached the end of your tour. You have explored only a small part of the museum, and further masterpieces await you. If you'd like to take a break before continuing your visit, the Café Montléon, situated at the other end of the Salle Rouge, isn't far away. Or, If you prefer to continue your tour of the museum straight away, you could, following the same route, go down the Escalier Montléon in order to admire the Italian sculptures, including Michelangelo's slaves.
You have reached the end of this trail.
This statue, which dates from around the year 190 BC, was broken into many pieces when it was discovered in 1863 on the island of Samothrace in the northeast Aegean. But what exactly does the statue represent? Lecturer Françoise Besson.
La statue est recomposée à partir de ces fragments.
The statue has been reconstructed from these fragments, and its original site is well known. It stood high upon a hill above the sanctuary of Samothrace, which is a sanctuary dedicated to the gods who protected sailors. They were known as the great gods. Even though there are still some parts of the statue missing, such as the head and the arms, the wings leave no doubt as to the identity of this goddess. She's the goddess of victory, whom the Greeks called Nike. Since the Archaic period, so since the 6th century BC, she's been represented as a woman with wings. The statue stands on a base that's been sculpted in the shape of a ship's prow, and is quite a realistic copy of a warship from the Hellenistic period, as it includes all the innovations seen in fighting ships at that time. In particular, we can see that the supports that held the oars stick out quite a long way. This feature allowed the craft to travel much faster.
The inclusion of the boat probably means that the statue commemorated a naval victory, although we can't precisely identify which one, as Greek cities were frequently at war at that time. In the sanctuary of Samothrace, the statue was seen from a three-quarter view, which meant that visitors would have been faced by her left flank. This is also the side which shows the dynamism of the composition to its best effect. Françoise Besson.
La déesse est représentée au moment où elle se pose sur le bateau.
The goddess is shown in the act of landing on the boat, so she's still partially airborne, and her wings are at full stretch. But at the same time, there's her right leg, which actually forms quite a solid support. The dynamism of the statue is heightened by the particularly skillful rendition of her clothing. She's wearing a delicate, transparent tunic known as a chiton, which the wind has moulded against her body, revealing its forms. This is particularly evident when we look at the stomach, where we can see the indentation of her navel. The shape of her left leg can also clearly be made out beneath this delicate, transparent garment.
The sculptor enhances the virtuoso impression by creating a contrast between this delicate, transparent garment and the deep folds of the cape, which is known as a himation, around her legs. The himation has slipped away from her belt and is only being held on by the wind. Before you move on, go over to the display case on the left-hand landing of the staircase, where you'll see the statue's right hand. It was discovered in 1950 and gives us the impression that from her lofty position in the sanctuary, the goddess was raising her hand in a salute.
The Venus de Milo. A woman stands half naked, her legs covered by drapery. Her hair is tied up, her expression serene. The arms are missing. This is one of the most famous statues of Greek antiquity. Lecturer Nathalie Gatelier.
Cette statue a été découverte en 1820 dans l'île de Milo.
This statue was discovered in 1820 on the island of Milos. By total chance, a Greek farmer made the discovery in his fields. The statue was very quickly bought by the French ambassador to Constantinople as a gift to Louis XVIII, who in turn immediately gave it to the Louvre. It instantly became hugely famous, due to its stylistic qualities and also because of the missing arms. Everyone wanted to name her. Because she's half naked, the name of Venus very quickly emerged. Venus was the Roman goddess of love and beauty. But as this is a Greek statue, she really ought to be called the Aphrodite of Milos.
Yet, through history, the statue kept her Roman name and became the Venus de Milo, from the French name for the island. The next thing that researchers wanted to do was to discover her age.
When the Venus de Milo was discovered, it was thought to date from the 4th century BC, because semi-naked figures and this type of face were quite fashionable in that period. However, closer inspection revealed details such as the spiral, pivoting movement of the body, the very realistic treatment of the stomach, and the sensuality of the face. And then there were a certain number of strange details in the proportions of the body. For example, the left leg that's a little too large. All these things, in fact, point to a very specific period, between 130 and 100 BC. So, it was the work of a Greek sculptor who was looking back to the past, to the 4th century, but who reworked everything to come up with a totally original work.
Although to this day the identity of the sculptor remains a mystery, the Venus de Milo has inspired many artists and given rise to numerous works of art over the 19th and 20th centuries. The arms of the Venus de Milo were never found, but Nathalie Gatelier is going to try to help you imagine them.
C'est pas très difficile pour son bras droit, puisque vous avez le départ du bras, il faut imaginer.
The right arm's not too difficult, because we still have the top of it. So you need to imagine the right hand at her left hip, so it's crossing over her stomach. Where we do have a problem is with the left arm. You can see that it was added on to the sculpture. It was sculpted as a separate piece from a different block of marble. So we can see that the arm is raised from where it fits onto the shoulder. But what is she doing with it? There are several theories. She may have been holding something up, perhaps a mirror, for example, one of her attributes as she's the goddess of beauty. Another attribute we find fairly frequently with Aphrodite or Venus is the dove. At other times she has a weapon that she's borrowed from the god of war. She may have been leaning on a pillar, but she might also have been part of a group. In this case, there'd be a second figure on her left, perhaps one of her lovers. So it might well have been Ares, the god of war, and if it was, she would have had her arm around him.
En démarrant de face, si on tourne autour de la Vénus de Milo...
If we start off by facing the Venus de Milo and move around the sculpture, the first view is almost certainly the best. When you're facing her, you really get the full effect of the double twist in her body and the way her gaze is focused slightly upwards. And then if we move clockwise around her, we can get a better look at the drapery on the right-hand side, as well as the slight bulge of her stomach. Then, if we carry on around the statue, we get to the back, and there we realise that the work is a lot less accomplished. Her back is still quite smooth, but the work on the drapery hasn't been treated with as much care, most likely because she was designed to be placed against a wall. From here, you can very clearly see the join between the two blocks right in the middle of the statue, at the level of her hips, about 10 centimetres or 4 inches from where the drapery starts. If we carry on round, we see that the left side is not the most important view, because here again, the work on the bottom of the drapery hasn't been treated with as much care as the other parts. It's only when you come back to the front of the Venus de Milo that you really take in the beauty of the work.
This is probably the most famous painting in the world, the Mona Lisa, or La Joconde as it's known in France. It was painted by Leonardo da Vinci between 1503 and 1506 in the Italian city of Florence. But who is this woman with her enigmatic smile? Curator Vincent Delieuvin.
L'identité de cette jeune femme a été beaucoup discutée, mais très probablement il s'agit en fait de Lisa Gherardini.
The identity of this young woman has caused a lot of debate, but she is almost certainly Lisa Gherardini, a Florentine lady who married a certain Francesco del Giocondo in 1495. And this is where the French name for the painting comes from. La Joconde is the translation of Giocondo, Francesco's surname. It's possible that the portrait was commissioned from Leonardo da Vinci to celebrate the birth of a second son in 1502, and perhaps also to celebrate the family moving into a large house in 1503. All of these happy events may be the reason for the Mona Lisa's smile, but the smile could actually be Leonardo da Vinci making a sort of joke by transforming the surname of his model, Giocondo, or Gioconda in the Italian feminine form, into this characteristic expression. Giocondo means cheerful in Italian, so the Mona Lisa is Gioconda. She's happy, and that's why she's smiling.
L'œuvre est remarquable d'abord par sa grande dimension. C'est une peinture sur
The work
bois
is remarkable, first of all, because of its large size. It's a painting on wood measuring 77 centimeters high by 53 centimeters wide, or about 30 inches by 20 inches. The Mona Lisa is also an exceptional work because of the way it tries to create a dialogue with the viewer. First of all, take a look at her pose. She's sitting down and turned towards us in a three-quarter view, and all of this makes her seem very approachable. Portraits in the 15th century often used to include a parapet, which separated the space of the painting from the viewer's space. But here, that's been dispensed with. There's an attempt to achieve a real dialogue with the person looking at the painting. The Mona Lisa is also a painting in which Leonardo da Vinci tried to find the most natural way to portray his model. This natural impression is, first of all, apparent in her pose. She's relaxed and smiling at us quite calmly. The impression of naturalness is also created by the artist's technique, which is very refined, the sfumato technique that you hear so much about. It's an Italian term that means smoky and refers to the misty appearance of the forms with their hazy outlines. This is what gives such a natural appearance to the depiction of light. Somewhat paradoxically, the work also appears natural because of the harmonious way in which it's been constructed. The Mona Lisa is a painting in which the composition has been very carefully calculated. It's a composition based on geometric principles. Look at the Mona Lisa's left eye, for example. It's exactly halfway across the painting. We could also talk about the elliptical shape of her head, and there are many more details that have been created according to geometric principles.